supported yesterday and the full ownership approved today a resolution consisting of two elements. One involved a neutral site for the AFC Championship game, and the second involved the location of a potential wildcard game in the AFC North. Depending on the outcome of this weekend's games, one or both of these elements may become unnecessary. We believe this is a focused approach that would only affect 4 teams and directly address the potential for competitive inequity resulting from 30 teams playing 17 games and 2 playing 16 games. It was critical for the owners to vote today so that clubs know going into this weekend what they're playing for. In closing, I know this was a trying week for everyone, including those of you on this Zoom. Thank you for doing what you do as we head into our last weekend of the regular season. And with that, I'll turn it back to Brian McCarthy.
Thank you, Commish. We'll next go to Rich McKay for some remarks, and then we'll get to our question. Rich?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Commissioner. To echo the Commissioner's sentiments on DeMar, we've not quite seen something like that. It was traumatic for certainly the teams, the players, the family, the fans, and, hats off to the medical personnel, everything that went into giving him the best possible outcome. And hopefully, as the Commissioner noted today, and obviously as the Bills noted, he is certainly making progress. The issues that we addressed today in this resolution that was passed really come in a very unique circumstance, and that is that you're having a game canceled. You're having to cancel the second to last week in the season, not week 1 or 2 or 3, where there's a way to potentially manipulate the schedule and get the game played. And it involved 2 teams that don't necessarily impact the playoffs from a qualification standpoint. Nobody would be, to the Commissioner's point, disqualified by this game not being played, nor would they qualify by this game not being played. It really got down to seeding, and that's what this tried to address. And so there were 2 elements to it. The first element was what I'll call the neutral site element. The neutral site element just said that if 2 of the 3 teams that play, I should say 2 teams that play in the AFC Championship game could potentially have been the number 1 seed, had this game been played, then the game would move to a neutral site. Michael North will be on the call. We've got charts that can show you how that could possibly happen. But you're really talking about 3 teams, right? You're talking about Buffalo, you're talking about Kansas City, you're talking about Cincinnati. And there are a couple of situations that could occur where any one of those 3 teams could have been the 1 seed. And if 2 of those teams that could have been the 1 seed end up playing each other, it would be a neutral site game. That's element number 1. And I'll go to element 2. Element 2 really involves 2 specific teams, 1 Cincinnati, 1 Baltimore. Because you're in a situation where Baltimore is going to have played 1 more game than Cincinnati, and you're getting into a situation where they actually are going to play this weekend. It's hard to figure out. There's no perfect equity result here. But what we recommended and what the membership passed was allow this game to obviously have the ultimate meeting this weekend. If Cincinnati wins, no change. The seeding is as it is. If Cincinnati does not win, then Baltimore will have beaten Cincinnati twice and won't have a chance to have the championship of the division because Cincinnati has played 1 less game. So the proposal was that Cincinnati remain the 3 seed in that instance, but there's a coin flip to determine the home field in the event that Baltimore wins this weekend. A lot of discussion. There were a couple amendments proposed that would have split the proposals. Those amendments did not pass. So that's the background. We voted to pass it. So Resolution G1, which you probably have a copy of now, passed and will be in effect. We needed to do it today, to the Commissioner's point, because tomorrow starts football, and we need to be ready for that. People need to know what the rules will be for this weekend, and more importantly, for the seeding in the playoffs. So that's why it was passed today. With that, I'll turn it back to Brian.
Thanks, Rich. It's now time for questions. If you can look down below, hit your raise hand function, and we'll try to get to some questions here. Let's begin first with Sam Farmer.
Hi, guys. Thanks for doing this. This could be for Rich or for Mike. What are the criteria for choosing a neutral site? Obviously, the place has to be available, but what are the other? Is there some logistical criteria?
Michael?
There we go. Thanks, Rich. Sam, the answer is we're going to work with the impacted clubs. We're going to work with our events group led by Peter O'Reilly. They've already begun having some of those discussions. Not prepared, I don't think, yet for us to commit to indoor or outdoor or where. Stadium availability is a factor. A lot of our stadiums are undergoing off-season renovations relative to field replacement and stuff like that. So we'll probably have more on that, Sam, next week. As a reminder, as Rich said, there's a reasonable chance that this Sunday night, this neutral championship game proposal is moot, depending on the results of the Kansas City and Buffalo games. So if this is moot, we won't go down that road. But if we know this is on the table as a possibility, we'll surely ramp up those efforts and have something to share with you next week.
Next question, Jeff Hobson. Excuse me, Jonathan Jones.
Just why was the rules not followed, the winning percentage rules for the AFC North, rules that have been in place for years, and why were they not followed in this case?
Well, let me start, Jeff, with that. I would say it's not necessarily they weren't followed. It was that you had a circumstance that wasn't necessarily captured. We don't capture everything in every rule and in every policy manual. And sometimes when you face situations, you have to try to make adjustments. And this was one of those adjustments. Not a lot different than in COVID when we were trying to make sure that we got to 272 and we had to do a lot of schedule manipulation, and some teams that were affected were not obviously happy with it, but that was done in the best interest of all 32. And that really was the focus of this, is what's in the best interest of all 32. And that's why this was voted on and then voted on prior to this week's game so that all teams would know.
Next question, Jonathan Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. That was actually my question, but I guess I'll ask the backup, which is the potential coin flip. Has the league thought through what that looks like? Could you just sort of explain what that would look like if that is necessary next week?
Brian, you want to get that one?
Yeah, it's something, Jonathan, we'll give you more information, most likely in the next several hours here. Stay tuned. Next question, Judy Batista. Next question, Nate Davis, USA Today.
For Rich or for Mike, obviously these contingency plans were laid out in the release last night. But one that was not was, if the seeding holds, Cincinnati would play Buffalo in the divisional round. Obviously, they didn't have the chance to win that game. It would have had the head-to-head and the home game against the Bills had they. Was there any consideration to moving a potential Bills-Bengals divisional game to a neutral site?
Yes, there was. And I think the discussion with that was logistically, people weren't comfortable with the idea that you could do that on 5 days, 6 days notice. And that's kind of when made the decision of the least intrusive way is to deal with the championship game when you have time to prepare for it, but not to leave the divisional game alone. And that was discussed at length on the call today amongst ownership.
Hey, Rich, I'd also only add that, a lot of the discussion here all week was about how the fact that Buffalo and Cincy never got played, they're going to have a different number of games played relative to Kansas City. But when it comes to Buffalo and Cincinnati playing each other potentially in the divisional round of the playoffs, they have played the same number of games. They've both played 16 games. So there wasn't really a conversation about a coin flip relative to the host site. We'll let that play out on the field this weekend. Both Buffalo and Cincinnati could be the 2 or the 3. However, those seeds solidify on Sunday night, that will determine the host sites for a potential divisional playoff game between those two teams.
Mike Florio. Okay, next question.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Sure.
Failure with technology. Any consideration, Rich, given to the possibility of simply resolving the Bills-Bengals game with a coin flip, the regular season game?
Not in the competition committee, Mike. Not in the, maybe there were discussions at the league office about that. That was never brought to us or discussed with us. There was discussion early in the week about, cancellation, rule it as a tie, all those things. But I don't really remember the coin toss discussion for that game and the result of it. And then I think the uniqueness of when this game happened in the season and the fact that it wasn't going to affect the playoffs really led to the idea that cancellation was the right method. But I don't remember and certainly in our competition committee call last night, we didn't discuss that.
Albert Breer.
Hey guys, I just have 2 quick ones. First of all, I think you sort of answered this when you were answering the divisional question, Rich, but I'm just wondering, first of all, the sort of imbalance between having the wild card game potentially be determined on a coin flip and having the championship game, at a neutral site. I assume that's logistical, that maybe it's too hard to turn around and go to a neutral site for the wild card round. And then the second question is just if you guys have looked at potential neutral sites, places like Detroit or Indianapolis that have hosted those sorts of things in the past.
So let's go back because you make the good point, because in reality, the one I should have been dealing with is the divisional round, which Michael North kind of corrected. In the wild card round, yes, it was discussed, the idea of, well, should that game be a neutral site? And it was even discussed on the call today. And the response back to that is not enough time. Remember, you got to sell tickets. You got to have teams have, the ability to get there. You got to be able to do all that. So that's why the wild card round didn't make as much sense as far as neutral site, and accordingly, it didn't really get any push. Although there were teams that discussed it, so that's really why it happened that way.
And then the potential neutral sites, have you?
Yeah, I leave that to Michael North. He's a potential neutral site guy, as opposed to the competition committee.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Yeah, look, we're still looking. The ones you suggested surely are in the conversation. Surely so are others. I'm sure we'll be considering things such as the availability of the team's fans to travel to the sites. I do think we'll have a lot more information on the potential neutral sites after this weekend, if in fact this is still a possibility, which it may not be after Sunday's games.
Mike Petraglia.
Rich, I just wanted to clarify something, or clarify in my mind something you had said about the existing rules and the need to alter those rules or come up with something else when an exceptional or extraordinary case like this happens. Is that why the neutral site situation scenario was considered in this case?
Yes. I think it's that would be true, Mike. I mean, in this case, we viewed it as completely extraordinary circumstances, very challenging circumstances, but extraordinary. And, this idea of going to 271 versus 272, you can't, in a book, you can't write every potential that could happen. Heck, we get this all the time in the rules book. And sadly, every once in a while, we reacted and we put a specific rule for one specific play. In this case, there isn't a rule that applies to 271 versus 272. So we did view this as extraordinary circumstance, and that's why the idea was created of, okay, should there be a neutral site option here?
Dan Graziano.
Hi, Rich. I'm wondering if you've addressed the potential inequities regarding home field advantage, where games would be played. I was wondering if there were any conversations and what ideas there might have been about addressing potential inequities regarding who gets the 1 seed in the bye if Buffalo finishes a half game behind Kansas City, for example.
Well, yes, there was discussion of that, but then I think that the determination was that we would not get into that space. The better space would be that we would deal with the one big issue that we could, which is home field advantage. That was probably the easiest one to deal with, as opposed to trying to deal with to your point, the 1 seed. And that's just the way we came out. Listen, I'm going to stay from the start too. We never went down this path and in this discussion of you're going to create perfect equity. You're not. The object here was to mitigate the circumstance that we were faced with as a league, present different alternatives, talk about it with the league office, talk about it with the competition committee, and create a proposal. That's what we did. But I wouldn't say, Dan, we thought we were ever going to get to perfection where, you were going to get to perfect equity. It would be just better for us, easier for us if we had 272, but it was the right thing to cancel, and it was time of the year. So this is how the proposal came about.
Caleb, no.
This is going to be somewhat similar to the question just asked, but was there ever a consideration on a coin flip for the number 1 seed if it came down to a half game difference, similar to what the AFC North could end up being?
We didn't talk about it last night on the call. And I know it was probably talked about during the week, but it was not talked about last night on the call, and nor was it talked about today on the owners' meeting.
Okay, next up, Rob Motti.
Rich, Zach Taylor made it clear that he doesn't agree with the rule changes. How much input did you give the teams that are most affected by these changes?
We gave him a lot. I'm very respectful of first of all, of the Bengals. I've known the family forever. Mike Brown was on our committee for a long time. Katie's on the committee. Katie made a presentation last night. She made a presentation today. She's, pretty eloquent and made her points. And so, yeah, there was plenty given to them because they are the affected team. So you wanted to hear from them. I think on the neutral site situation, basically all 3 teams going in had kind of agreed they were okay with that situation. Didn't mean they were going to vote for it, but they were okay with it. And so that always obviously helps when you make a proposal like that. But there was input given by Baltimore, certainly by Cincinnati, and Buffalo today. Opened the meeting with just kind of an update on DeMar, the player, and how he's doing and so forth, and didn't say much on the proposals, but they were certainly given the opportunity.
Eric Bell.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for doing this. I'm curious as to how counterintuitive or how tough of a sell it was to take potentially a home game away from a division champ. And to that end, why was it important to give Baltimore the possibility of a home game? Because when you look at the entire season, how many games they lost, what the situations were, there were times that they could have won games that would have not made this an issue. How much consideration was given to that?
A lot, Jared. So he's talking about, phase 2 of this resolution. Phase 1 being the neutral site, phase 2 being the coin flip between Baltimore and Cincinnati if it occurs. There was plenty given to the season, and the fact, that the argument made that, the Ravens could have won last week and this wouldn't all those arguments were talked about, Jared, but I think the bottom line on it was that the unique circumstances were 271. Baltimore has beaten Cincinnati once and is going to Cincinnati to play for the second time. If they beat them, they will have beaten them twice, and the only reason they don't have a chance to win the division at that point is because of that one game. Now, you could say that assumes Cincinnati would have lost, which there's nothing to assume that, but you're really saying that I'm going to deprive Baltimore of that opportunity. The idea was that if they do go into Cincinnati, if they do win, if they've then won 2 of those games in the division, looking at that head-to-head, one way to create a little more equitable, remember, not perfect, but a little more equitable situation is the coin flip for home field advantage. Leaving Cincinnati as the 3 seed, but the flip the coin for home field advantage, and that's what we voted on today.
Okay, let's wrap it up with Mike Garofalo.
You guys talked about indoor, outdoor with regard to neutral site for the AFC Championship game if needed. These are all outdoor teams. There's no dome teams amongst the 3 we're talking about as potential hosts in a normal scenario. If it can be held outdoors and there's a site available, would you lean more that way to say, hey, we'll keep it the way that it would have been if one of those teams had hosted?
Michael?
Yeah, Mike, I think I'll just go back to what I said before. All the factors will be considered. Again, this may become moot on Sunday night, but if on Monday morning we know this is a possibility, all those conversations will continue. Don Aponte and Dave Gardy, who lead our football operations group, they always have stadiums on backup. Somebody earlier mentioned some of the games that we moved previously. So there's always stadiums on backup. Those will be considered, as will any others that are available. And I'm sure we'll have more on this next week as we dive into it, if we even need to.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We know it's been a trying week. Look forward to the weekend. Thank you.